Thank you for your help, Jim.
You bet. My pleasure.
And the stream is active now as well.
Thank you,
Hey,
Tim.
we'll just give people another minute or two to. It looks like, Denise, we have a quorum, though, according to my notes.
Yes, we do. We have a quorum.
Great, thanks.
Get started.
Okay, it is the top of the hour. We're going to go ahead and start, so I'll call this meeting to order. We'd like to welcome you all out to the UETN board meeting this Friday in February. Thank you all for joining us, and we certainly extend a welcome to those who are connecting and viewing this meeting remotely. We will proceed with our first item, and I hope that you've board members have had a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting, which was on December 9th. And unless there are any changes, I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes from December 9th, 2020.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Colleen and Steve. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Great. The meeting, those meeting notes stand approved. We will now go on to our next item, and I'll turn the time over to our Executive Director, Ray Timothy, for some very important board recognition.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wagner. I appreciate that. You know, one of the greatest benefits of working at UETN is the fact that we have wonderful people that we work with, both employees and the volunteers that sit on our boards, on our advisory councils, and just give us good sound advice as regarding what we're doing and how that pertains to them. The disappointing side of it is when those individuals move on, and that's the case today. We want to recognize one of our board members who has served for diligently for 3 years, and that's Colleen Eggett. And so we have a proclamation here that I would like to read. It says, whereas Colleen Eggett, State Librarian and Division Director of the Utah State Library, has served 3 years on the UETN board representing libraries and librarians throughout the state of Utah. And whereas her diligent leadership and collaboration now provide world-class connectivity and online services to libraries, public schools, colleges, universities, clinics, health departments, and hospitals throughout our state, and whereas she has thus served millions of librarians and library patrons, students, educators, faculty, staff, patients, clinicians, and healthcare providers. Now, therefore, the Utah Education and Telehealth Network hereby honors Colleen Eggett with this certificate of appreciation dated February the 12th, 2021. Colleen, we are so grateful to have had you and have you on the board, and want you to know how much we really do appreciate your input and all that you have done to help us be a better organization and how to help us focus in particular on public libraries and those areas over which you have stewardship. So thank you. Would you like to say a few words at this time?
Yes, I would like to just say thank you myself, and how much I appreciate you, Mr. Timothy, and how much I appreciate everyone on the board. You have been so exceptional to work with. You have an incredible amount of expertise. I admire your ability to get things done, and that is evident in the funding that you receive through the legislature, and and elsewhere. It's evident in all that you do. You're a magnificent group, and I have come to totally appreciate your wisdom, your counsel, and all the many things that you have done to make public libraries better in the state of Utah. Thank you, Laura Hunter, specifically. Thank you, Rich Finlinson, and all the different people who have helped in so many ways. Just really, I appreciate you, and thank you.
Colleen, thank you again for your service. We appreciate it, and we certainly wish you all the best, and are excited for your future. We hope that you'll stay in touch.
Thank you. I would love to stay in touch with you.
Great. We will, yes, everybody clap, please. It's hard when we're not in person, so. Wonderful. We will now move on to our next item, and we'll turn some time over to Laura Hunter, who will talk about the 2020 Community Service Report.
Thank you. I just wanted to draw your attention to this report. It's linked in your board materials. So this is part of our annual reporting to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And this captures our work for the community, meaning the entire state of Utah, for 2020. And Jen Gibbs, who's in today's meeting, is the lead writer for this, as well as Denise Tribble, our graphic artist. And this was her last project before she also retired. So if you have the electronic copy, if you would like hard copies, if you could just email, the email is in the board materials. If you have another group that you want to send them to, we are having some hard copies made available. So I think it just shows what a tremendous year 2020 has been, and all of just the range of projects that our staff has taken on and really been successful with. So I hope you enjoy reading it.
Thank you very much, Laura. And I would add, it's nice to look back on 2020 and have some positive things to highlight and talk about. So, well done. Any comments or questions? Okay, great. We will move on to our one action item for our meeting this morning, and I'll turn the time over to Ray and Kelly.
I'll go ahead and defer to Kelly. She's been the project manager on the CARES project, along with Lisa Kuhn, our chief financial officer, and they both have done a tremendous job. So we'll go ahead and let Kelly make the presentation.
All right, well, thank you so much for giving me just a few minutes. I'm sure that you're used to hearing from me on the CARES projects. But what I really wanted to just talk about today, I'll be kind of brief, but I just wanted to let everybody know that we are in our final wind down for the CARES projects. We have done our final reporting to the governor's office, and I'm happy to report that we have spent all of our CARES funding. So it ended up being a total of, there was 125 million, but also we spent the interest that was accrued during that time per the CARES guidelines. So in total, we spent $125,017,307.35. All projects were completed and all funds were spent. We are so grateful to all the partners that we worked with. They were all just rock stars, and they all just really knocked it out of the park. I personally had just a wonderful opportunity working with all the different CIOs and all the different institutions, and we just have appreciated all of the hard work that has happened. People followed through, they met their timelines, and right now we are doing all of the housekeeping items that you do, once one of these big financial projects closes. And so that's where our focus is shifting right now. And our amazing video team has started to do some videos to highlight the different CARES projects. And I'd like to share, there's an overall video of the CARES project. There's two versions. There's a shorter version and a longer version. And I'm just going to share the shorter version with everybody so that you can kind of see some of the great work that's being done now to highlight these CARES projects. And just shout out if it's not working, but I think it's working because we tried it before. But here is the video.
UETN, we understand that what we're building goes way beyond technology. We connect people to information, resources, and one another. Utah's investment in its network for education and healthcare has proven more critical than ever during the COVID pandemic.
In March, when we went remote, there was definitely panic. A lot of faculty were like, how am I going to do this?
Together with our partners throughout the state, and thanks to support from the Utah State Legislature, UETN led over 250 CARES Act projects to rapidly enhance access to networking, digital devices and tools, and professional learning.
UETN provides a lot of efficiencies that other states don't have. And there's always a collaborative effort that UETN provides, not only to help with negotiating, licensing, and managing the license with software, but also providing support and training and advocacy for us, those vendors, and bringing all of us together to be able to ensure that we don't reinvent whether it's training materials or new strategies or processes.
We are already collecting a lot of data that show that we've been really successful with the UEN CARES funding.
There's no greater metric of success than having students who previously didn't have access to the remote and blended learning, all of a sudden being able to be in that classroom with their teacher, with their peers, and engaging in that learning.
The professional development that I was able to participate in through Reimagine Teaching has improved not only my pandemic teaching, overall teaching, because it has helped me to streamline everything.
UETN is proud to be here to keep Utahns learning, working, and connecting through the pandemic and beyond. A technology network and a people network. That's the Utah Education and Telehealth Network. We're here for you. Learn more at uen.org/CARES Act.
Well, and I think that's the perfect way to end my presentation. Thank you to Katie Garrett and her team for putting that together, and I will turn it back to the chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly. This was an incredible effort by so many people, and because of the extraordinary effort and the time, the limited time in which the team had to just disperse these funds and make sure that they have a positive impact for our state. It has been proposed that as a board, we support and approve a proclamation that commends the project leaders, staff, and all of the participants that were involved in this great effort. A copy of the proclamation is you can find that on a line. I'm going to go ahead and read that now, and then after I read it, I will entertain a motion from members of the board to approve this proclamation. Proclamation of Accomplishment from the UETN Board on the successful completion of UETN CARES Act projects. Whereas the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act has provided much needed funding for education and healthcare, and whereas the Utah State Legislature allocated CARES Act funding to the Utah Education and Telehealth Network and its partners to complete numerous technical digital tools and support projects, and whereas these funds were provided to help entities within Utah respond to the public health emergency created by the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas these organizations supported Utah's most vulnerable children to ensure they have access to online learning for up to 1 year, and whereas these organizations increased professional development opportunities to support remote learning through the Reimagining Learning program that trained more than 7,000 educators, and whereas this funding was used to support telehealth sites through the purchase of anti-malware, antivirus, and data loss prevention software, backup power supplies, a virtual firewall management system, firewalls, and a telemedicine platform. And whereas this funding was used to procure additional statewide software through contracts for public education, and whereas higher education entities supported education efforts with edge wireless hotspots and equipment, software protection and equipment, key online learning systems, laptop and hotspot landing and software, and whereas the Utah State Board of Education and K-12 entities supported education efforts through increasing wireless equipment to support social distancing and provide emergency home internet access for their most vulnerable students for the school year. And whereas the Utah State Library and Utah's libraries participated in hotspot lending programs to certain library locations for up to 1 year. Now, therefore, the Board of the Utah Education and Telehealth Network hereby issues this Proclamation of Accomplishment to acknowledge those who worked diligently to initiate and complete these far-reaching projects, including all UETN staff members, the governor's office and legislative leaders, school district and higher education leaders, library leaders, faculty and technical staff, and participating telehealth providers on this date, signed by Robert Wagner, Board Chair, and Patty Norman, Board Vice Chair. I will take a motion now to approve this proclamation.
Chair Wagner, I would like to make that motion and just comment what a huge boon this has been, a huge help in a time of great challenges. Heard some great things from our institutions in higher ed. I know that you've been frontline with that, and we've got 3 or 4 others from institutions that are members of the board that I know could probably give some very up close and personal examples of things that have been helpful to this. So I would make that motion.
Thank you, Jared.
I'd like to second that.
Okay, looks like we have both Patty as well as Steve have seconded that. Any further discussion or comments?
Well, I'd like to just take a moment to thank Kelly Cole and Lisa Kuhn for all of the work that you've done. I'm sure that this is a massive project. You had so many different projects and constituents and clients, and there were so many ways that you helped people around the state of Utah. And I just really want to thank you personally for the great work that you've done. Thank you.
I would certainly add my support and just gratitude. This has made a tremendous impact and did in our ability to be able to serve our faculty, staff, and students, certainly here at Utah State University, and then with my colleagues all across the system. So thank you very much. We have a motion to approve this proclamation. It has been seconded. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Thank you. The proclamation passes, and Patty and I will certainly get this signed, Ray, and we'll make sure that we get it back to the team.
Great.
Okay, we will go on to our discussion items now, and we'll turn some time over to Ray, who has several items for us this morning.
Thank you. I'd like to share my screen. I'd like to recognize with us today Thomas Young. Thomas usually joins our meeting, but he is our legislative fiscal analyst, and he does a great job in helping us present our legislative funding requests in the best light. And so I'm glad that he's here with us today. As I reported back, we've been assigned to a different committee, and the committee we've been assigned to is the Infrastructure and General Government Committee. And we have two of the members of that committee were on our previous committee. Everyone else is new to UETN and what we're doing, even though I think most of them have an idea of who we are and what we do. But I wanted to share with you action of that committee and where our funding request is. This is on the left-hand side is their prioritized list from the committee. This is their prioritized list for funding. And then on the right-hand side is our one-page funding request. And so as you recall, on our funding request, priority one was a request to restore the base budget, compensation and equipment funds that were taken from us. And that was absolutely essential that happened. So let's turn over here to the left-hand side and look and see what the committee has done for us. The second highest ranked appropriation for them is to restore the base budget. And that's to the tune of $2.371 million. So if you come back over to our priority, that is number one and number two added together equals that amount that they have recommended. And it's number two on the list for ongoing funding. The next request we had was for equipment, to have our equipment replacement funds of $3 million restored. And so that is the number three priority on their list, is to restore that equipment fund to the tune of $3 million. The priority two, so that takes care of all of priority one, that it's on their list and it's very highly ranked for ongoing funding there. We also have priority two was for growth and operations, and that was our request for ongoing funds of $463,000+. And that would be priority number six, $463,000. So they have taken our very top priorities and placed them very highly on their list of recommended funding. The one that I'm not so sure about, because I'm not familiar with a committee of this size having so many recommendations, but it has to do with our priority two of the one-time funds that we use to connect all of these locations throughout the state. These are the new schools, all of the new circuits and everything that we have to add, on average 25 per year, and there are one-time costs to pay for that. Our request for $643,500 is on their prioritized list, but it's down to number 23. So I'm concerned that it appears to be way down on the list, but I don't know that, and I don't have a feel for that. But I can tell you that it feels good to see that they recognize the importance of what we're doing and that they have placed us and prioritized us, especially with the ongoing funding that they have prioritized for us. Are there any questions about that? Thomas, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you said it well. We'll see how it goes this year.
All right, thanks. And thanks again, Thomas, for all you do. We have a great relationship with him, and he helps us a great deal. Okay, I'm going to unshare or stop sharing. And I want to walk you through just a few. Okay, where are we? Here we go. How do I get my screen back? All right. Well, I have some bills I want to discuss with you briefly, just so that you're aware. And we're keeping our eye on these bills just to see where they are. We're providing some feedback to the sponsors of legislation. House Bill 6 and House Bill 8, those are basically our budget bills. They've already been passed. We have the fiscal year 21, that's this year's budget, was approved, and also part of House Bill 6, fiscal year 22 base budget has been approved, and it's enrolled already, meaning it's gone through everywhere it needs to go. It's just waiting for the governor's signature on that. House Bill 8 is our fiscal year 22 compensation budget. And so that would be for employee compensation. And that's good that one also has been passed and is enrolled. House Bill 36 is a telehealth mental health program bill. And it's been a pilot program for 1 year where they where you can use telehealth to provide mental health services. And it has a sunset date on it, and they didn't want it to sunset. So that's the purpose of the bill, is to have the program to continue on. And it's to provide mental health counseling and services for schools, school districts, charter schools, the School for the Deaf and the Blind, and being able to continue on providing those types of services. If you have any questions on any of these bills, please speak up and let me know, and I'd be glad to see if I could clarify any more on that. House Bill 38 is one that we spoke of in our last meeting, and that is the one that basically says that we need to do what we already do, and that's make sure that students aren't exposed or don't have access to pornography, and that any of the software providers that we contract with need to make sure that students are protected and are not exposed to pornography. And if they fail to comply, then we can terminate their contracts. None of the bill requires us to change our operating practice. It's really the sponsor mentioned to me that he wants it to be really a message bill, that businesses, if they want to do business in Utah, need to comply, and that it's very important to Utah. House Bill 243, I'm going to defer to Laura to talk about it. She's been in touch with our attorney to help get greater clarification on the privacy protection amendments.
Sure. Thanks, Ray. And I'll just add on House Bill 38, the one that Ray just spoke of, it just passed out of committee right as this meeting was starting. So we should see that move forward pretty quickly. On House Bill 243, privacy protection amendments, this creates a new position at the state auditor's office, a chief privacy officer for the state, and it requires the state auditor's office working with that privacy officer and a privacy committee to develop standards for all state agencies to follow in terms of data privacy and protection. And So there's the controversy, or I guess the concern has been that there are already chief privacy officers in our higher ed institutions and at USBE. And so the question that we're trying to figure out, working with the sponsor of the bill, is whether agencies that already have a position like that and are held to federal law for state privacy, like FERPA, whether they would be part of this or if it would just be other state agencies. So that's to be determined.
So Laura, is higher education considered a state agency in this bill?
So yes, they are, but higher education has also explained that because of FERPA and GDPR and other standards that already exist for institutions, the question is whether they're subject to this committee that's part of the state auditor's office, or if they would be not considered part of that, to be determined.
But are you familiar with, I think it's House Bill 274, which would require reporting on where all private data is? That's a real concern to us.
I wasn't familiar with that, Steve. Thanks.
If we had to do that, that would be a lot of work, and I don't think much benefit from it.
Okay, we'll put that down and we'll take a look at that and see what that's trying to do to us and where it is, and give you a report back. House Bill 279 is the Higher Education for Incarcerated Youth. And what that does is it directs the establishment of the Incarcerated Youth Program at Dixie State University. Its intent is to help those who are incarcerated have access to higher education. Students needing high school graduation credit would use video conferencing to access the courses that they need, the concurrent enrollment courses. It allows for a 2-year flexible schedule of higher ed courses, again, through video conferencing, where students could earn college credits that would help them work towards an associate degree, a bachelor's degree. And it also provides the advisory support that these students would need, and an academic counselor for that. So that's Lowry Snow from down in Washington is the sponsor of that bill. There's House Bill 304, and this is sponsored by Jennifer Daly Provost. And it creates the Digital Equity Program within the State Library Division. And it allows the State Library Board to have rulemaking authority, and it designates that a broadband director within the governor's office coordinate the development of broadband infrastructure statewide. So that would be Rebecca Dilge from GoEd and the Broadband Advisory Group. The library director is to appoint a director of digital equity, and then that person would oversee the digital equity program. And the digital equity program really is to take and help families that don't have internet connectivity to actually have access. On lines 113 of the bill, it describes who the target audience is. It would be individuals who live in rural areas, have disabilities, are senior citizens, are Native Americans, have economic barriers in digital resources, are homeless, or are refugees. So again, the intent is to get broadband out and into those homes for those people. And it's a little confusing to me on the makeup, because it sounds like there's the director over the digital equity, and then it also talks about the executive director appointing a broadband director, and then the broadband director would partner with us, with schools, with all of the individuals, all of the organizations that we partner with, UDOT, anyone that we collaborate with in trying to expand broadband throughout the state. This broadband director would be responsible through the library division to help with that or to oversee that. So it gives them the assignment to apply for federal grants, to participate in federal programs, and to administer federally funded broadband related programs. It sounds a little bit kind of like what we do with E-rate, with the USDA when they have grants available that we go after funding for. So I'm not really sure. There are many groups that see the reality of the difficulties families have if they can't afford broadband, if they don't have it to their home, if they live in very remote locations. And all of these groups are organizing individually as groups and trying to solve a real problem. And they should be commended for it. I feel a little bit like we're tripping over ourselves, and we have so many different groups going so many different directions that I think it would be very helpful if we could bring all of these various groups together and sit down and kind of craft an overall statewide plan on how to address that specific need. That's my personal opinion on that, but we've been asked to join 2 or 3 other groups to help with that conversation. Any questions on this one or comments?
Thank you for that explanation, Ray. I think you've done a good job summarizing it. Some of the aspects are outside of the wheelhouse of the Utah State Library at this time, but I think that as we can get a statewide conversation going, probably we can come to an agreement about what are the best steps to be done to have happen. And then I do know that the State Library will want to collaborate with UEN on many of the aspects of this, and just appreciate your support over the years. I really do. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, Colleen. The last one I have for today is Senate Bill 41, and it has to do with mental health access. And it's Liz Escamilla is the sponsor of the bill. She actually pulled a group together and had Sarah Woolsey, who has been the chair of our UTN Advisory Council. She was part of that group, and she said that they had the opportunity to sit down and craft the bill, and they all left feeling very, very supportive of it. But it has to deal with reimbursement for telehealth mental health services, and basically, if they haven't in the past, they haven't allowed reimbursements for telehealth services. It's always had to be a face-to-face service, and now because of the pandemic and there've been a lot of changes to the rules, at least temporarily, where it allows if telehealth services are of the same standard and meet the same need, then they should be able to be reimbursed at the same rate. So that's really the direction that this bill is trying to take it. We're not participating yet in any mental health telehealth services, but I know that Matt has been actively engaged with many discussion groups, and the day may come where we would be a player in the mental health telehealth services arena. So those are the bills that I have. Are there any others that Steve, you mentioned House Bill 274. We'll look at that. Someone mentioned I need to look at House Bill 348. I haven't looked at that one yet. I'm not even sure what that is, so I'll have to pull that one out. But
Ray, I was wondering if we could just have a brief discussion on the Senate Bill 1 and how that took out the ESSER funding and what that meant to our districts, our schools and whatnot. Do you have information on that, or do you want me to just provide some of that information?
Yeah, if you would, please. I'm not up to date on that like you are.
Okay, so the State Board of Education had an initial request for $260 million for disrupted learning. And that request, if it was broken down, it would actually only fund one, maybe possibly two FTE at any of our schools in the state of Utah. It seems like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. At that time, we created a chart that talked about how ESSER money or CARES money could be used or has been used by our LEAs, and then how this new mitigated, this new money could be used, and then, kind of the differences and similarities between all of them. Then our list that was taken in the request for the $260 million was actually taken as a list that was then used as these things cannot be funded. So the legislature put into writing in SB1, and Ben, it's SB1, correct? That was passed at the very beginning. That stated that any capital expenditures were not going to be funded by the legislature. And then they said that any of the ESSER money that was given federally, now this is the complicating part. So the federal allowability measures said that capital expenditures could be used, for example, ways to increase the ability for students to stay in school, which included things like HVAC, airflow. There were other things, that schools are needing, machines and whatnot. It actually made those allowable. But if a school chose to do that and use any of those federal funds, then it would come away from their MSP funds. So what they did in essence is stated that even though the federal allowability measure said that you can use ESSER funds for capital expenditures, if you do, then you have to repay the state on any state funds that they would have given you. Am I saying that correctly, Ben? Which was a huge, we already had 151 of our people apply for their money, and we had most of them approved. And so that meant that we had to ask all of our LEAs to resubmit grants. Part of this, and the reason why I'm telling this group, is because there were a lot of capital expenditures that were asked in support of broadband measures or, the sustainability measures for schools and whatnot. And now they have to rethink those. The one that we did allow through, and I wanted to be open with everyone on this, is the San Juan Project. And the reason why is because there was evidence showing that did disrupt learning, that if that project doesn't, that whole San Juan Project doesn't come to fruition, then those students are not allowed learning opportunities. And that we actually felt there was a legal ability for us to be able to put that through, and we're being open with the legislature about it. But that might come back at the very end and have them say that can't be done. But at this point in time, USB is staying firm with that. But the legislature right now, those are unallowable expenditures. They are allowable, but have to be repaid if you use them.
So how far along in the process is this, Patty?
So SB1 was passed, I think, the first week of the session. So we didn't find out about it until right before. They did not work in coordination with USBE, or I don't think, obviously not UETN either. And we have talking with the sponsor of the bill, which is Fillmore, I think, or it's either Fillmore, yeah, it's Fillmore. And there are some representatives and senators that are working in the backdrop to have an amendment to those allowable expenditures, but they said that wouldn't come out until the very last day in the bill of bills for us to be able to know if that's going to be in there or not. It has created huge havoc and just distrust among our LEAs, especially when it's federally allowed, but the state is not recognizing that.
If I could add something to that, Patty. Thank you for the summary. The reduction on the state funds, it actually says dollar for dollar. So it's very specific with how much money would be returned. And it removed the professional development component that we were planning on for teachers. Also removed the ability, excuse me, for districts to purchase devices, Chromebooks, et cetera, for students. So that's something that we're really trying to get in place, is the PD piece and the ability to use the technology. It's really tied currently with what's been passed. It's just specific to before school, after school, summer programs, intervention, temporary staff hiring for remediation, but it's very specific, and even more specific than what was allowable in the federal regulations.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And that also brought up the fact social emotional learning is not allowed either, those components. So those were the 4 components that it listed specifically, dollar for dollar, the LA would have to repay if they use the federal allowable funds on those things. Then yes, it is allowed, but then they would have to repay those state funds. So just something on everyone's radar, because it does impact all of the work that we do, especially when we're talking about broadband access. We're still looking at the San Juan project, but we did let them know that, go through on that. So.
Okay. All right, Patty, thanks. I concerned for you. That's a tough deal. I don't have anything else on legislative issues unless someone else has something you want to bring up. Okay, Robert, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Do you want to keep going with your executive director's report?
Sure. I have 2 brief items that I want to share with you. I know you've been waiting to hear about the Corporation for Public Broadcasting audit, the CPB audit. It took quite a length of time to work through that. It's the first time that they had done anything virtually as far as auditing, and it made it more difficult for us. They did disallow all of the in-kind support that we receive from the University of Utah and Utah State University. We receive a lot of support, especially from the University of Utah. For example, our legal services, our HR services, all of that kind of support that we receive from the university, we used to claim as in-kind support, but they've disallowed that at this point. But so it reduced the total amount of the grant that we are receiving, but we still have one of the largest grants in the country as far as CPB grants are concerned. So we're anticipating that for this next year, the grant will be $3.6 million. So that's a significant amount. We worked with them on their findings. We accepted their findings, and we're going to readjust the way that we had claimed that in-kind support. We will no longer claim it, but we still have a significant grant there from CPB, so we're grateful for that. The second thing I just wanted to share with you is that Steve and I met with a couple of technology directors, and one from California, one from Oregon, and we've been invited to join the Western States Pact Broadband Group. And this would include Washington, Oregon, California, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, and I believe New Mexico. I'm not sure there. But what they want to do is they want, from each state, they want the executive director of the education network, that would be me. They want the state librarian. Colleen, we're going to need to find out who your replacement will be, because we'll need to have the state librarian be part of that. And then they also want to have the state broadband director, and that would be Rebecca Dilge. And I have not talked to Rebecca yet. But if we join that group, what it will do is it gives us an opportunity just really to learn from one another. We have common interests, common challenges, and that it's just a great opportunity to meet with our peers across, in the Western states that have similar needs and like we do. So we're looking at that, and I feel really good about moving forward and being part of that pact. So that's everything I have to report on, Robert.
Thank you, Ray. Any questions for Ray? Okay, thank you, Ray, and thank you for your great work with the legislature too, Ray, and especially working with the new committee. If there's anything that the board can do to support your efforts here as the legislative session winds down, please let us know.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet. We will move on to our next item now. We'll be talking about the strategic plan, and Laura is going to lead that discussion.
Yes, thank you. And first of all, I wanted to say thank you to all of you board members. You probably recall that the strategic plan was passed months ago, almost 6 months ago, and you gave us some reprieve on doing the quarterly reporting while we were focused on all of the CARES Act projects. So thank you for that added time. And now that we're in a new year, we're ready to go back and revisit that conversation. So I'm just going to brief you on where we are right now, and also some feedback that we received from the UEN Advisory Council during their meeting on February 5th, and then ask for some input from you on how you want to hear about our progress on reaching the goals of the strategic plan. So just to begin with kind of a recap, the plan is divided up into these different goal areas. So you'll see network, applications, sustainability, broadcast, and so on. And each of them has a declarative sentence that describes the goal for that work area. And then under that are the initiatives that you all agreed to for 5 years worth of projects that are associated with each of those goals. And those are the things over on the right-hand side of the plan that have the little carrots in between them. So the work to be done is to add one more layer, which is the activities that go under each of those initiatives. So here's an example for you. These aren't finalized, but here's an example from the broadcast goal. And the items that are in red are things that the managers over those areas have developed with their staff. And these are projects that they plan to do on a shorter term, so it could be a year or less. So these would change more frequently, and these are the things that you would be getting updates on a little more frequently. In the past, this is how we reported our progress to you. So this is what the website looks like currently, and it has each of the different initiatives, and then some sort of progress shown with a percentage. So on at the UEN Advisory Council meeting, we had a really great interactive activity that was led by someone from our professional learning department, and shared with them a lot of examples and got a lot of input. So here's an example of 6 samples of what this could look like, and we got a lot of consensus from them. So I wanted to share with you some of the consensus. And then we also asked just visually what looked better on the page, and how would it make it protect your time so that it's easier to see at a glance what our progress has been. So pulling all together the advisory council feedback, they wanted to see the progress at multiple levels that I just described to you. The dashboard, so there's also about a dozen performance metrics that are part of the plan, and that would be a separate part of the visuals that you would see in terms of our progress. They recommended quarterly updates. They thought something more frequently than that wouldn't be a best use of everyone's time. They recommended a graphic progress bar, so a picture or an image rather than the numeric percentage. They recommended making sure it's ADA accessible, mobile compatible. We talked about if it needed to be in printable form, which seemed to be less of a priority. It was kind of it would be nice if, but it's not critical. Also keeping it very concise, because it's easy to write a lot of detail about these projects, but they recommended keeping it very brief. And then using the website to link to other information or sites that have to do with that project. So this is a sample of what they achieved or they arrived to in terms of the consensus. So you'll see the 3 levels with the dummy text over on the left-hand side. So the things that are in the gray lines, so like under be transparent and efficient, there are 4 pretend items. Those are the ones that the managers are still developing that would need to be added to this visual. And then rather than the progress indicators with colors that you see over on in the middle of the page, they recommended the progress bar that goes from a lighter color to a more saturated color. So in this example, it's the green one. So it's time to now turn that conversation over to all of you and see if you agree with the recommendations from the Advisory Council, if there's something else that you'd like to see in terms of how we report progress on reaching the goals of the strategic plan that you have approved, and any other input that you have on this.
So Laura, I'm just going to jump in and say that slide that you showed with what the 6 or 8 different options, I think the one that you settled on, I like that. I think it's easy to read. It's easy to decipher the progress for each of the items. So I appreciate that particular one in that format was recommended. Other thoughts from the board? Feedback. This will be important for us to be able to follow along.
Hi, Robert. This is Rick. I chair the advisory council. I just wanted to make note that we had really pretty good participation, both from public ed and higher ed, from all of our constituents. It was a well-attended meeting. So I think we got a good cross-section of feedback.
Thank you, Rick. Other thoughts?
This is Jared. I just echo that thought that you shared, Robert, that Advisory Council has done a great job of narrowing down what could be done and some good options there.
So, Laura, perhaps we can take the silence from the board as a positive sign that you are on the right track, that the advisory board has offered great advice and recommendations, and that we support that.
That's great. Thanks, everyone. And sticking with the quarterly reporting, that means our next report to you would be in our April meeting. So you can watch for that next. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next agenda item, and that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Jen Gibbs is going to lead this discussion.
Good morning, everyone. So following up on this body's approval of forming a diversity, equity, and inclusion working group, we have developed an initial plan. Our goals for this quarter include forming the working group, hosting our first quarterly meeting, and then working with that group to further identify priorities and make recommendations to UETN leadership. Based on other community engagement work that we've done, we have found it helpful to have different ways for people to be involved. So we proposed to structure the group with members, and those being from your organizations, UETN's constituent organizations, plus internal staff members from across our organization. Their work will include reviewing our practices, exploring improvements, and making recommendations to our leadership, participating in regular quarterly meetings and ad hoc discussions as needed. For example, I can imagine as we get booted up, we might want to circle back after our initial meeting to just button something up and not have to wait until our next quarterly meeting. And also invite input from community members and subject matter experts on different topics that the group discusses as priorities. And a second way for people to be involved would be as contributors. These are external and internal subject matter experts who can help the group address specific diversity, equity, and inclusion related topics. For example, a contributor might present to the group on a given issue or serve as a sensitivity reviewer for content. We also plan to keep this board updated on our diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And for instance, I'd like to call your attention to the document in today's materials that comes from a report that KUEN is required to make as part of our annual reporting to CPB. And our request for you today is to make recommendations for members and or contributors for this diversity working group. And you can email me at jgibbs@uen.org. Either suggestions for people I should reach out to, or you can have those folks reach out to me directly. And if anybody has any questions, of course, I'm happy to address those.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions from the board? Okay, I'm sure Jen would appreciate your recommendations for participation. So if you could work directly with Jen and send those via email, that would be appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay. We will now move on to our advisory council reports, and we're going to start with the UTN Advisory Council, and I believe Mars is going to give this report.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Wagner. So the Advisory Council met last Thursday, and so I just wanted to cover some of the highlights from that council meeting. The first one being the Utah Department of Health telehealth survey presentation. So we had an initial look at the survey that they started to put together about a year ago. And so the survey basically focuses on chronic disease management using telehealth. They worked with Doppel, the licensing agency, and they sent the survey out to about 18,700 providers in the state, licensed in the state of Utah. And they received about 1,200 responses. About 85% of the respondents said that they were already using telehealth technology, and around 60% have been using telehealth for less than a year. And obviously, that's linked to the pandemic. They're still in the middle of analyzing all of the data that they've put together, and they're expecting to get a final report released around mid-year. There's a lot more data in that report, but I'd rather wait till the report comes out before we actually talk about it a bit further. The telehealth bills in the legislative session have already been covered by Ray, so I'm not going to go over those again, but we also heard about a federal bill that is being reintroduced into legislation to have physicians provide care to patients across state boundaries without having to be licensed in that state. And the bill would be in place during the pandemic and 190 days after the end of the public health emergency. And as stated in the Advisory Council meeting, there are numerous concerns in Utah regarding this bill. We had an update in relation to our NRTRC program. And so we've created a professional development site, and our NRTRC team have been working with the Washington State Telehealth Collaborative to create professional telemedicine training that satisfies the mandate the state of Washington has passed that requires that all licensed healthcare professionals, with the exception of MDs and DOs, undertake this training. The course is hosted in Canvas and takes about 20 minutes to complete. It's very high level and touches on all the necessary components of telehealth. On successful completion, the individuals are issued with a certificate, and we've had tremendous success since the beginning of December when we launched this. with over 16,000 individuals enrolled and over 9,000 who have completed the course. And finally, in relation to the UTN Advisory Council leadership, we heard that the vice chair position is open, as Preston Marks, who currently fills the position, is stepping down from that role, but will be maintaining a seat on the council. And Sarah Woolsey, who has been the chair of the council, she shared with us the fact that she's taking a new job with the Utah Department of Health, and that she will be stepping down from that role. And that is all from me.
Thank you, Mars. Any questions or discussion? Okay, great. We will move on to the UEN Advisory Council report. I believe Rick is going to give that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I will just cover a few things. Actually, most of the items that we discussed at the in the advisory council, you've already received updates on. We did have a legislative update, but it's always good to see that a week later, a lot of things have progressed. Where Ray was hoping and shared his hopes for what the committee would be, the committee that they report to that would fund, prioritize our funding requests. You saw those already, that those were highly ranked, which is good. We also went through the strategic plan, those things that you saw right there. That was a very interactive presentation and discussion. Katie Blunt and Tim Stack from UEN staff led that discussion using Nearpod, which was purchased through the funds of the CARES Act for K-12 education. And every time that I see that program being used, the engagement factor and the participation is just so greatly enhanced. So even though we were all in different locations, it really felt as if we were having a really good discussion right in the same room. And the way that the tools provided, the ability to provide feedback. That's why I think that the feedback that you're receiving is highly valid because of just the way that that particular report was put together and that. So we also had the opportunity to look at the Reimagine Teaching productions. This was led by Katie Garrett from the staff, and just all of been a lot of assets that have been created by teachers, and now they're going to catalog those and put those into e-media, was shared with the council. Of note, I think, when I look at all of the projects that have been done through the CARES Act and through the Reimagine Teaching, which is a part of that, obviously a part of that CARES Act, it is truly amazing everything that has been done here in the state of Utah. This is unique. I talked to a lot of colleagues from across the country, and they're just ramping up in a lot of these same areas, and we're concluding a lot of those same kinds of projects. It's just a real testament to the leadership and to the dedication of UETN staff, and the leadership of this organization, but working with districts and schools and the State Board of Education and everybody coming together. We have really taken a very difficult situation, and although maybe we're not perfect, and certainly we've learned a lot of lessons, we have certainly done a tremendous amount of work. I've had many conversations with my daughter who lives in another state, mostly when she's in tears. And she worries about her now third grade daughter, who's had very little education in the last 12 months, as they've just not been able to respond to the pandemic in ways that I have seen schools and districts and everyone here in the state of Utah trying to provide and make the very best situation out of a difficult circumstance. But that was basically our my report. Those are the things that we discussed, and just happy to be able to work with this group and to be able to provide support and information to you as a board.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate the work of both of our advisory boards. Any questions for Rick? Okay, great. The next item on our agenda is an information on board. Members will find links to several videos that have been recently produced, and encourage you to take the opportunity, maybe even that you will have this morning, as we're going to end early, to watch those videos. The last item that we have, our next meeting scheduled for April 9th. You will remember that we did, in our last meeting, discuss the meetings for 2021. We changed the meeting schedule, and so just want to make sure that board members are remembering that. Our next meeting is scheduled for April 9th. Normally, that would be our strategic retreat. We talked last time about the possibility of perhaps pushing that retreat off, with hopes that perhaps by fall we might be able to have an in-person retreat. So I would like to propose to the board that we do that our April 9th meeting be a normal board meeting, just as we are now, and push the strategic planning retreat off again until later fall, to see if there's a chance for us all to be together. Any concerns or questions about that? So Ray, is that okay if we go with then a normal board meeting for April?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Okay, that's what we will plan on. If you could have your calendars marked for that April 9th meeting then. We have been efficient with our time this morning. Appreciate your participation, both board members as well as staff. Colleen, we once again wish you well, and thank you so very much for your participation on the board. And we will wrap things up here. I'll entertain a motion to close our meeting. Unless you want to stay on.
Motion to close.
Second.
Thank you. Patty, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand. You all have a great long weekend and happy Valentine's Day.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.